we are live.
We are live. That's it. We're finally up and going on the plate up.
Wonderful.
Or the dressage, as you know.
AKA the dressage.
The dressage. Nothing to do about horses, though.
No. No. Not yet.
So we are a food and beverage, hospitality, hotel podcast. Have I missed anything?
I think that covers it, yes.
Yeah. So quick introduction. My name is Hashan. I am a chef. I've worked for nearly 15, 20 years in the industry. Australian. Started off in Australia, did my apprenticeship in Australia through some restaurants and hotels. Then, worked for a hotel group called Hilton back then. And then I traveled the world, went to Seychelles. From Seychelles, I went to Vietnam. And now from Vietnam, I'm in Thailand, Bangkok, Thailand. So, and I work for a hotel group called Banyan Tree. So that's where I work. Sebastian, tell the people what you do.
My name is Sebastian, as you've mentioned. Thank you very much. I'm an F&B director. I've been in the industry for almost all my life. I was born into it. But working for the last 13, 14 years professionally. I started my career in Morocco, moved to the UAE, from there to Vietnam, from Vietnam to Thailand, and now I am currently in Mexico, working for One and Only and opening a property here.
Nice. And so Sebastian and I, for those who don't know us, and there'll be a lot of that, we worked together in Vietnam
Yes.
when we both worked for Banyan Tree. Well, I still do, but so we were working in Langko for Banyan Tree, and I was the executive chef in Banyan Tree, and Sebastian was the F&B director. So we worked hand in hand, and then we both moved to Thailand. Didn't work for the same company, but we're good buddies, so we always caught up and kept in touch. And that's why we've started this podcast. We've been talking about it. It's always been in the back of the mind. And under the current climate, I think, as I wrote, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. There's no excuse for why I couldn't do it now, especially with all the free time that a lot of people have. So that's a top tip. Check the checklist that you've always wanted to check, if that makes sense. Tick that checkbox. Yes. So you're opening a hotel. How's that going in that part of the world, especially currently? What's a hotel opening look like under the cloud of COVID?
Well, a hotel opening is already an interesting setup on itself. And now with the COVID situation, it changes a lot of things, obviously. I mean, the whole world has changed and will be changed for the future. We were supposed to open in June. I came on board in February, but most of the XCOM were already on board since September, October last year. So we had a tight timeline with the objective opening the doors to the public on the 1st of June. And this was really at the very beginnings of us hearing on an international level about COVID-19. So we especially here in Mexico, Central America, it's the part of the world that has been hit by this epidemic the latest, I would say. And so we saw it growing, right, from China, from Wuhan, all the way west to Europe and now to the United States of America. And so we saw it coming, and we knew that it would impact us and it would impact everyone around us, but we weren't sure how. Very early on, we started talking about social distancing. What can we do to limit exposure, to limit contagion? And as soon as we realized that some countries had already started, like Wuhan went into quarantine, and some countries are already considering quarantines and lockdowns. As soon as one state took the measure to install a lockdown, we immediately started doing this at our canteen. I mean, we have a small team. It was 40 people back at those times. And so we separated all the chairs and the tables at the canteen. We did tables of two, and we put 2 tables together so that you would be sitting across another person with at least 2 meters between the 2 persons. And we installed time slots also at the canteen so that not everyone would go in and eat at the same time. And then we were kind of in a wait and see situation. You know, when things like these happen, when crises happen, we always look at the local government. Those directives supersede everything else. And we were waiting to see if the Mexican or the local government here in the region was going to install a lockdown. And probably, I would say in hindsight, a week before they started closing restaurants in the region, we decided to go on a work from home scheme.
Okay.
Because we realized that it's a pre-opening. Yes, you have a few meetings. Yes, you have to meet some suppliers and you have to be on site. But ultimately, we were driving to work to sit behind our computers and do our work. And we could very well do this from home. Mm-hmm. So the decision was taken with the owners and corporate to have everyone work from home. So it was a logistics challenge, especially for IT, to make sure that all of the department heads and the senior managers had a laptop, access to all of the platforms that we have, and make sure that everyone, the main priority was obviously to keep everyone on the team and to make sure that everyone had something to do. Because we already had some positions that were not administrative, like engineering, security. And so we needed to make sure that everyone was one group and everyone felt part of something, and also that everyone had activity. So HR did a fantastic job in finding online learning platforms. Our group has also online learning platforms, and we very quickly made this accessible to everyone. We did schedules for trainings, online trainings, crisis management, revenue management, hospitality management, finance. So a lot of activities for everyone to kind of pick and choose, and as well as some compulsory ones that we were supposed to do anyway. So this is, as you said, this is a perfect time to do the things that we normally push on the side or don't do. So yeah, now we've been doing this for the last four weeks. We're going to enter the 5th week. We're waiting for the time that we can actually go back on site, because back of the house is in the process of being handed over to us.
Okay, so how much construction still left to go actually in currently?
I can't give you a full percentage. I would say maybe 70-80%
of construction is still left to go, or
still left
complete?
To do. Yes.
Okay,
well, it's complete. So it's 20% left to be done.
Yeah. So in that case, then, to actually do the are there workers coming in, or all that's stopped right now?
It has stopped right now.
Okay.
It went on a bit because we were early, the admin team. We were early, meaning that we decided to work from home before the government announced a lockdown or a stay-at-home campaign. But as soon as that was put in place, then the work stopped.
Okay.
So there will be a state. Yes, tell me.
Okay. So, all right. I mean, it'd be redundant to even ask when a revised opening day would be currently with the cloud of coronavirus and not knowing when things are going to open. How do you think now this affects any opening strategy and, a marketing plan, promotional plan? How do you find that's going to now,
I think
change?
everyone is on this. It's interesting because it's those crises and those pandemics are the great equalizers. So everyone has the same information, and everyone is kind of looking into the future and trying to guess or to see what could be done. We are doing the best we can to foresee or forecast the future. Travel agents, and when it comes to sales, travel agents and these big groups are still asking questions. There's still leads for groups. They're asking for press kits. They're asking for information. So everyone is gearing up for a reopening. We don't know when, but we're preparing for it. So that's one part. Another part, obviously, is if you are in the middle of an opening and you have this crisis, kind of puts a pause button, but not really, because you're still working. Every day I'm working on a lot of things I have to prepare for the opening. So I have more time, and therefore I can polish things a bit better. I can go a bit deeper into SOPs. I can go a bit deeper into my wine selection, into my training packages, my training procedures. There's a lot of things that you can dig a bit deeper. And on another side, it's also it's a human thing, right? You have to take care of your team members. We are a very small team, but these happenings binds people together because we all suffer at the same time. And so we call each other very often, even people who are not in your department. You call them up. How are you? How are you doing? Do you need anything? Can I help you with something? Even though you can't see people physically, you can still make them part of your life. And I think that's a good thing, is that we really come close together, and we'll be a stronger team going into the opening for sure.
Yeah, I think this is the topic of the moment for, in all industry, especially hospitality, hotel industries, who have been, affected so much, especially when you consider, airlines are grounded, hotels are closed or pretty much told to close. And of course you've got government regulations that are, a lot of, whether you are an essential. Nearly all restaurants don't fall under essential service except for takeaway. I think it's really affected a lot. Now, I know in Bangkok, we're still open, but we only have a very few amount of guests. There are a few hotels that are open. A lot of hotels have chosen to close. And I think across the board, this industry is not going to bounce out of this straight away. I think it's going to be, I hesitate to say, but I mean, as much as I realistically want to believe by the end of the year, a part of me says close to the end of next year.
So how do you tell us a bit more about this? I mean, here I'm in a scenario. First, I left Bangkok just before all of this happened, and I've entered now a pre-opening phase in the middle of this. You've seen the evolution of the restaurant scene in Bangkok. I mean, hotels and restaurant scene in Bangkok from the very beginning. So what's your take on that? How did it evolve?
Well, it's hotels when initially. I mean, Bangkok was the first. I mean, not Bangkok. Thailand was the first country outside of China to have COVID. Actually, back in January. So I must say, you have to give credit to the way it was handled initially, and it still is handled here, because maybe it's an Asian culture thing. Being an Australian living in an Asian culture, there are certain things that that cultures do differently. Very quickly, and I'm sure you probably remember as well, people were in masks. I would probably say at the start, you'd probably say 50%. By the first 2 weeks, I'd probably go towards a 70% mark.
Yes.
People in masks, people were ready. Temperature checks were just starting to happen. I remember in our hotel, we were starting to take temperature checks of all our staff. This is in January, mind you. right? People, staff were getting temperature checked when they started work and temperature checked when they left work. Sanitizer was out. We were already putting in early pandemic procedures, which we had from Banyan Tree, within our own SOPs. Now,
were guests and staff
yes,
monitored at the
yep,
same
yep.
time,
So
or did you start at the same time?
we first started with guests, and then we moved over to. We first started with staff, and then we started with in-house guests. So if you were in-house guests, we were taking temperatures, and then it moved to restaurants as well. So, and that all happened, I would say, within a week. So it wasn't like, we started with the staff and then 2 weeks later we started with guests. It was started with staff. And then I think 2 days later we started with guests, in-house guests, and then it moved into even guests coming for restaurants. So that's how it moved. So that happened quite early on in the process. Now, when the government put out its regulations that, all bars were closed, so all bars had to close, restaurants were allowed to stay open. And then by the end of that week, from that announcement, that announced all restaurants had to close as well.
Did they do it in phases, like restaurants that can cater to more than, or have a seating capacity of more than 50 guests?
No, it was pretty much all restaurants had to close. Hotels were allowed to keep their restaurants open for in-house guests only.
Okay.
So if you had in-house guests that want to eat, they could eat in your restaurant, but outside guests were not allowed to come. Now, I think that rule still exists, but now that all, tourists and foreign guests have actually left the country, it's there's no point in keeping your restaurant open. So that's where, we are in Bangkok. So, but when you look at the reality of all this, and a lot of people are kind of keeping their fingers crossed, saying, by the, if the restrictions are lifted by June, we'll be back to work. I nearly think that's wishful thinking. I don't know what you think about that, but I nearly think it's wishful thinking, because when you look at other countries, I mean, first of all, if I use Australia for an example, there's already restrictions on who can travel overseas. So it's not restrictions more on you can't travel overseas. Yes, you can go overseas, I think. But they're suggesting you don't go on holidays to countries until they have shown 0 cases of deaths. So they have to be at 0 deaths, And realistically, a lot of these countries are going to be wanting that to stimulate their own economy. So they'll be saying, listen, holiday within your own country, stop going overseas. Even if you do come back, there probably will be some quarantine that you have to do. And they'll probably say that quarantine now has to be at your own cost, because I know back home, the quarantining is picked up by the government, I'm pretty certain. But eventually they'll probably say, listen, we've advised you not to travel. You're going to go and travel. If you come back, you're going to pick up the bill for 14 days quarantine at certain places.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think there'll be a pretty big discouragement from traveling overseas.
And then something also, something I picked up on what you just said, and that we can delve deeper into that for another episode, is this whole local traveling, major holidays in your own country. And we will be able to see what the impact on that will be on restaurants and hotels.
But the problem with that is, and this is, if you think about why people travel overseas for holidays, there's 2, of course. One's the discovery, experience a new culture, go and see something new. But another part is it's just cheaper. It is cheaper to travel. I can tell you now, in Australia, it'd be cheaper to travel to Thailand for a week than it would be to travel in Australia for a week, in certain places, because
for an equivalent standard.
Exactly. Yeah, that's you have to be clear with that. But when you consider that, and there might be it might be a little bit cheaper, but when you look at the value, if you say, listen, I pay my flights, I get my food cheaper, I get an accommodation, right? Yes, for the next, within your own country, you may either drive or you may fly a domestic flight. I can tell you now, to fly Melbourne to Sydney, it's nearly sometimes up to $300 one way. So you could nearly come to Thailand. I mean, these Australian dollars. You can come to Thailand for about $8. So if you consider that, for an extra $200, you're traveling overseas, you get cheaper accommodation at, an equivalent level of hotel. Food's a lot cheaper. You're experiencing a completely different culture.
Yes.
Yeah. I think so. That's why I'm a bit worried about this whole domestic travel thing, because I'm not sure there has to be some, but again, I think after this, a lot of, hotels and restaurants will be reviewing their pricing, and competition will be a lot more savage, I think, now. Because that piece of the pie
is much smaller.
It's much, much smaller. So, everyone's going to be competing for that business. And realistically, people are going to be a lot more careful about spending money on,
obviously,
let's call it luxury things, which is holidaying.
But capitalizing on what you just said, and this is something I wanted to talk to you about, is this whole takeaway, emergence of all these restaurants that have had to close, that had never done takeaway before. And now the only thing they can do is takeaway. So they had to transform their operation. Well, they had to close their restaurant, first of all. They had to look at their manning levels. They had to look at if they can keep people or not. And then to make ends meet, if at all possible, because I know a lot of restaurants are doing takeaway and they're not covering their costs. They had to launch themselves into takeaway. And so entering a market that they don't know well and where they are the new players. Because let's say Bangkok takeaway is extremely easy. You have so many applications, and Thailand already is a society where a lot of things are very convenient, and food is one of them. And you can order, when I was living in Bangkok, I might not be a good example, but I don't think I'm the only one. We used to order in at least minimum once a week, let's say twice a week.
Only once?
Or twice at a minimum.
Yeah.
At a minimum. You have this Saturday, you're tired, and bonchon
of course.
really sounds great. I miss bonchon. So I wanted to know, because I guess, I don't want to there's no point to name names, but for a fine dining restaurant, let's say, who's been doing fine dining for the last 7 years, all of a sudden they are doing takeaway. How?
Okay, so this there's a couple of things that I think, if there's anything that you can learn, if there's some great learning to do after this, let's be honest. As chefs, hoteliers, restaurateurs, we're all, especially in our, we've always been in the, let's call it the luxury segment, right, or full service segment. You don't necessarily look at takeaway as, it's kind of a convenience. So you don't put too much effort into it. It's something we don't.
It's not the glamour.
No, it's not the glamour end, right? It always has a little bit of a stigma at the kind of person that goes to takeaway.
Well, because if you're halfway proud of what you do and you want to do the best, that takeaway is not going to give the best representation of your recipe, your dish, your product.
Exactly. So I think after this, there's going to be a lot of, if there's some learning to come out of this, that this takeaway model is something that everybody has to think about. Any preconceived notions or thinking that we've had has to go out the door, because, you cannot, and this is where I think a lot of people have been caught out. And I would say, okay, don't say a lot of people that are just suddenly entered into the takeaway market. You cannot just take what you do every day and then say, this fits the takeaway model. You can't just change your model. It just doesn't. Things just don't translate straight away into a takeaway model. You can't take a fine dining dish and now serve that as a takeaway, right? You got the packaging, the plate up, you got the temperature, right? How does the food travel? Does it disintegrate halfway there? Does it fall apart? All these things have to be taken. You can't do that really nice plate up, those micro herbs on top, because as soon as you put a lid on top, and the guy, if it's in a car, it's in a car, but over here it's a motorbike. The not that. We know Thailand roads aren't the most smooth. As soon as he goes over, there's no potholes, but he's swerving in and out of traffic. Your nicely stacked micro herbs is going to be, just.
They're going to be steamed first.
Exactly. So, this is where a lot of people have been caught out, and I think that has really, really.
Let me ask you a question that might be a bit controversial, but do you think so first of all, what is the proportion of restaurants who did not do takeaway and all of a sudden started doing takeaway? And secondly, did they do it because they wanted to make some revenue to be able to help their teams and themselves to generate some revenue, or did they do it because everyone else did it and they wanted to stay relevant?
I think they did it. I couldn't give you a number, to tell you the truth, because there's so many different.
Bangkok, it's full of restaurants.
Right. And this is. I forgot to say one thing. The takeaway market, everyone's just thinking about Bonton Chicken, McDonald's, and all those kind of classic fast food takeaway joints. You forget that in Bangkok, you've got every street food vendor.
Yes,
is a takeaway. Right?
And that's what people don't know. And that's what I mentioned in the beginning. Bangkok is very well established in the takeaway business.
Exactly.
And people order their muping, which is their pork skewers, from the little guy in the street. That is maybe 20 miles away, but they know that this guy makes the recipe that they like, and they will order from there and only from there. So there are already some big players. And when I say big players in terms of reputation.
Yeah, because and the other part of this is, and I think we discussed this before, let's take a classic pad kapow, which is a stir fry, basil, pork, beef, chicken, whatever you want, right? You can buy that on the street for 40 baht, if I'm right? 40 baht.
30, 40 baht, yeah.
Yeah, which is less than $1, US dollar, right? Now, if you and the thing is, that guy who's selling it for 40 baht, he's happy to make 10 baht or even 20 baht on each dish, right? He's happy. He's got his 20 baht and that's it, right? Because he's the one guy, he goes to his like Macro here, which is like a Costco. He buys his bulk meat and cooks it.
Or goes to Talat Noi or
exactly.
Toi, right? Yes.
He buys his stuff and he does like that. He makes 10 baht, 20 baht per dish. I'll probably say it's probably close to 10 baht. And if he sells 80, 90, he's made a few baht and he's happy, right? A hotel or a restaurant can't put that on the plate because they got bigger overheads, power. You've got your manning cost. So all of a sudden, they're trying to sell the same pad kapow, right, for 120.
10, yeah,
120, 180. All right. And at the end of the day, people like the street food guys' flavor.
Yes.
Let's not forget that, right?
But that's why they buy from there. It's because they grew up with that flavor.
Exactly.
Right? And there's one guy who does the kaprao, and there's one guy who does the lab, and there's one guy who does the muping. And each one has his own specialty and special recipe.
Exactly. So you wouldn't necessarily gravitate to a restaurant, and say, well, I'll buy the restaurant version. Yes, you're going to get a better quality. You're probably going to get, you're probably going to get a little bit of a bigger portion, right? And you're going to get a bit of better quality. And
when you say quality, what do you mean about quality?
Well, quality of ingredient, right?
Okay.
You probably get a better quality of ingredient. You're probably going to get a leaner piece of meat or something like that. But I think that's where. And of course, there's another part to. I think if I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to say this correct, but I'll kind of have a crack at it. There are laws here. You cannot just suddenly terminate your staff. You can't just say, okay, now you're out of a job, right? There is some restrictions on You can't just, you either have your business has to completely close, but if your business is staying open, you can't just say, well, we have no business. So I think there's some clauses here. So a lot of restaurants have their staff left, so they have to do something with them, and you see that a lot when you go past these restaurants that are just doing takeaway, and you see all the staff sitting there, and that's because they still have to work. They still have to come to work.
Yeah.
So I think that's the current situation here, and I think that's around the world. I know back home, I got friends who are in the industry, they're laid off, and I mean, this is across the board. I mean, there's no point telling hard, sad stories, because it's across the board, whether it's here, Europe, America, right? It's across the board. It's an industry that's going to take a hit. And now, I guess what's more important is, how do you come out of this? Because if restrictions are lifted and people can come back to restaurants, first of all, are people ready to come back to restaurants? Are you going to go to the local steak joint or the local brasserie up the road? Because there will be restrictions that put in place. Social distancing is going to be something that's going to be around for a long time. I expect restaurants may have to operate at 50% capacity or seating capacity, or even something along those lines. Table will have to be separated, and if even if there's no restriction on tables not having to be separated, I think people expect that. And yes, we discussed this a little bit yesterday, just on an off chat. We talked about gloves and masks, and we were discussing what is the new normal. And I know I kind of threw it to you. I've never liked masks on waiters, for one, or gloves on waiters, because it can be intimidating, right? But I think that's going to be expected. If you go to, some, especially Europeans, I've got a friend in Austria who he's still struggling with the whole putting a mask on.
In Europe, yes, it's very interesting. Where in Asia, especially as you mentioned earlier, in the beginning of this situation, where very quickly, as soon as you went into the street or in the public transport, you would see people wearing masks, and then someone not wearing a mask would be odd. And in Europe, it's the opposite. Someone wearing a mask is odd.
Exactly.
It's what is wrong with him.
So now, can you imagine that in a restaurant?
I think what will happen is that we will have, and I always, throughout my career, I've always thought about this, is that for an industry that is so people-centric and people-focused, what we do is actually we deal with people. Ourselves, in our teams, and with our customers, with our guests, in our restaurants, in our hotels. We don't understand people that well. I don't know of any, and I might be wrong, but I don't know of any hotel company who has invested in psychological analysis of why do our guests come and what do they like. We always talk about experiences and creating memories and this and that. We touch on it, but we don't go very deep. And I think what will happen is, or I would definitely start thinking about, what is it that brings people to the restaurant? Why do they go to restaurants? They can eat at home, they can do takeaway, they can order in. Why do they want to go to restaurants? What is, and especially nowadays in a world where a lot of things are, you can buy Wagyu beef in the supermarket. It's not like it's something that is hidden.
Let's not forget now, after all this, a lot more people are a bit more qualified in cooking at home as well.
That's for sure.
If there's anything to take out of this, there's a lot more bread bakers out there. I think a lot of people have kind of, got over that fear of baking bread at home.
And I love that.
Yeah, I love it. I love baking bread, baking desserts and cakes and things like that. And people are cooking at home. And after this, I think people have been like, I could make a stir fry. I can cook, like you said, a Wagyu piece of beef. I don't necessarily need to go up the road to get this. And continue.
So people will, if people go to a restaurant to see something else, to enjoy the convenience, to enjoy actually service, to enjoy being served,
because it's a nice thing. If it's done properly, it's a great experience. But there you have, everyone has a certain level of expectation. And having a waiter with a face mask where you can't really establish a connection with him, and you can't touch him, you can't shake his hand to say thank you, that goes against people's perspectives and expectations of what is a restaurant experience. So all of that will need to be thought out. And I think new models will come out of it. Restaurant models.
Yep.
Definitely. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I will definitely come out of this a better chef.
More of these food delivery platforms.
Maybe. I watched there was a video on YouTube from the Harvard Business Review. Mm-hmm. And it was a startup in Colombia where they basically created a platform where they could create a new restaurant every week, because they had a central kitchen and they only did delivery. So with their experience in content creation, menu creation, graphic design, cost control, and basically concept development, well, they could, with their team of chefs, they could just create a new restaurant concept every week and have 30 restaurants or 20 restaurants coming out of one single kitchen. And everything is controlled, the portions are controlled, the amount of food you can serve in a day is controlled, and you eliminate a lot of the cost as well. So that's a model that's pretty much viable. This is also what we used to do when I was in Bangkok and in the hospitality group I was in. We didn't do takeaway, but we pretty much had a pool of chefs and we created concepts and opened restaurants. And so I think you're right. A lot of these takeaway businesses will sprout for sure.
Speaking of YouTube,
yes,
what are you doing to get away from all this, by the way?
Man, YouTube is a never-ending source of knowledge and distraction equally.
I think for me, YouTube is, if I take all my TV watching time, YouTube would probably be 80%.
I would not be far off. I don't think. I mean, TV nowadays, because we are closer to the US, we watch a bit of news online, but the rest is YouTube. I mean, obviously Netflix and Amazon and Prime and all of that, but YouTube for me is really where I can go and find very specific things that I'm curious about. And you and me, we're very curious, so we like to Google or type in every random thing that we don't know. So YouTube has been a great source of inspiration and also knowledge, I have to say. I've learned a lot I've learned more in the last 4 weeks, I think, in terms of pure cooking technique.
Okay. So what are you watching? What are you watching for?
So it's interesting.
What are you watching for knowledge, and what are you watching just to keep yourself entertained when it comes to the food world?
And I think it will speak to a lot of people watching a food video at 1:30 a.m. to keep you entertained. I don't think a lot of people do that, but I do, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
So lately, all right, I have to give a bit of background. So we have just arrived in Mexico here in mid-February, and Pam, my girlfriend, is Thai, and we both love to eat and we love to cook. So one of our first priorities was to find the ingredients and the produce that we know and that we like, and that will allow us to do the food that we like to cook. And a lot of those are Asian ingredients. And it turns out it's not that common here. So we found, luckily...
But I would have thought things like coriander, it's used in Mexican cuisine.
Coriander, yes. But when you go into the realm of galangal, when you go into the realm of rice flour, sticky rice, Japanese rice, Thai soy sauce, fish sauce, chili paste, gochujang, Korean chili paste, things like that, which is much more specific, obviously. So we have been cooking a lot of Korean and Japanese food. So one show that we watch is Mang-Chi. So
yeah.
I
with Action Bronson?
No, not with that. She's the opposite.
Oh,
of
the girl.
Bronson.
Yes. She's actually quite. Yeah.
So let me tell you.
I find her a little bit hit and miss. I don't watch all her stuff, but I do watch a lot of her stuff, actually.
Man, I watched her at first time. I told Pam, "What is this?"
I'm the same.
She's
a bit giggly and
she had a purple wig with an over-the-top personality, a lot of makeup, and I was like, "What is this woman doing?" And we've watched, I don't know, by now we have probably watched 30 or 40 of her episodes. And what she does is actually super legit. I mean, first, she's the Martha Stewart of Korean cooking shows on YouTube. She has more than 4 million followers.
Okay? Oh, really?
She's huge. She has 2 cookbooks. She is huge. And we didn't know. We just found out later on. But all the good thing about her is that all of her recipes follow the authentic traditional style. So it's not Americanized. It's not oversweetened, or the recipes are not changed. So she uses very authentic produce, and the recipes are very authentic. So we've learned a lot through that, and we've done a lot of Korean dishes, which is fantastic. And then I watch. There's another show which is Japanese, and this one I watch for my own enjoyment purely, which is called Party Kitchen. And they release every episode. There's no voiceover. It's just one point of view, but it's very, very well produced. It's very precise. And they do an ASMR version of each episode as well. We can talk about this later in more detail. But the level of precision, you look at it, you say, okay, this is Japanese for sure. Because it's very clean, it's very sharp. She cuts every single vegetable in the exact same size. The utensils they use are amazing. They're purpose made. What blew my mind is that they have, did you know that Japanese cooking stoves have a built-in grill drawer?
No, I didn't.
Man, it's crazy. So there's a drawer in the middle of the stove, which would be like right below the level of where you have the buttons to open the gas. And it's tiny. I think it's probably like 15, 20 centimeters wide. And you pull it out, and there's a grill there. You put some water so it doesn't burn at the bottom. And then you put your fish, usually it's fish, and you just close it, and it just bakes there in this tiny compartment.
Wow.
You have to look it up.
Okay.
So
like a salamander, like a little griddle.
It is like a little salamander, exactly.
Okay.
But it's built in, and you slide it open, and then you just close it, and you have no smell, no smoke.
And I'm guessing it's made for close quarters because.
Yes. So those are the 2 food shows I've been watching. Obviously, Matty Matheson with his new show Just a Dash. I think I've watched pretty much every single episode of that. And then drinks. James Hoffman.
Yes.
James Hoffman, always.
Yeah.
I discovered a guy called, I'm not sure about his name. I think he's Greg. His show is called How to Drink.
Yep.
Very good.
Well. Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, again, for late night entertainment, to see something beautiful, I watch the videos of Bar Times, which is a Japanese bar culture web magazine. And they do, it's usually one video, it's one drink, and they have a whole panel of up and coming or legendary Japanese bartenders. And they introduce one drink each all the time. And again, it's very well made. And their technique is mind blowing.
I think I may have caught an episode here and there of that, because I was once watched a Japanese guy shave a block of ice for just,
yes.
5 minutes.
So that's the guy from Bar High Five.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, that's probably one of the Bar Times videos.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you? What do you watch?
Man, I've been watching. Well, I watched 2 things. One, and we discussed this yesterday. And that's what I'm.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking. Who is an Aussie guy? He's on YouTube. He's there for entertainment, actually, because he's cursing through the entire thing. He's not your typical chef. He's only got 4 episodes when it comes to cooking, and all his other stuff's got nothing to do with cooking. And what's happened is, I mean, he's got a sense of humor, which is quite, either you like it or you don't like it, and it's not for everyone. But what happened is he's a Aussie guy, with the dial turned up to 100, right?
He's like an Aussie Maddie Matheson.
Exactly. And he just does simple cooking, and, he's all about anti-jar sauce because everyone's resorting to using sauce out of jars during quarantine. And he's like, listen, I want to show you how to cook food properly. And so, I don't watch him to learn anything from, but I actually just love the way he delivers the food, and that's that one. But the other one I watch it's just, I mean, they've only got 13 episodes or 14 episodes. I fell in this by accident. It's called Life in the Village, and it's a Sri Lankan cooking show, you could kind of say. But they don't, again, a bit like this Japanese thing you said, there's no one talks over, there's no one presenting.
Okay.
It's just a camera, and it shows them cooking food like they would in the village. And I find it really interesting because, for one, if you try and find a Sri Lankan cooking recipe online, yes, you'd find a couple for what you need, but you don't find one person producing the same. And yes, they're all it's hard to follow. And I guess, I mean, I don't know, there's not much, I don't know, it doesn't come with the glitz and glamour, and that's okay. But I've never, I just use it as a reference. But this one shows you how they do things in the village, how they go about cooking things in the village, how food comes out of the ground. And I find that really interesting because, I grew up in Sri Lanka where, I mean, for those that don't know me, I was born in Sri Lanka. My background is Sri Lankan. So I kind of had both lives because my dad's side of the family were from the city and my mum's side of the family was from the oceanside village. So we got both sides of growing up. Mm-hmm. But, we didn't spend so much time at mum's side because when we come to, we'd only go there for holidays. So, right, we'd probably see once a year, we may spend 3-4 days in mum's side of the family. So you don't really get the full grasp of how they used to go about doing things. And when I watch this, I see a lot of my mum's side of the family, my grandma who back in the day. So it's really interesting, and I really enjoy watching it. So
that knowledge is priceless.
Yeah. So, I was watching it the other day, and I mean, I had to call my mum and say, listen, what are they doing? Because that's really interesting. There was a technique this guy did. He got a big, he cut these bananas down, which were, the full ring of bananas and all green. And he digs a hole in the ground, burns a whole lot of leaves, mm-hmm. Cuts the bananas into, manageable pieces off the full stem, buries them, then puts some bamboo over the top, covers it with soil, and then he makes a little hole where he kind of gets a coconut shell, makes a little hole in the shell, and he burns some, husk, and he pushes that husk into that cavity he's made now, which is covered up. And I mean, this is a very quick way of explaining it. And then he just covers that shell up again. So he's made this like really ultra warm, smoky environment for these bananas to be in. Next morning he comes in, all the bananas are ripe.
Of course. Cool.
I was blown away. I mean, yes, you always know about putting a banana in a bag and leaving it in a dark space and they ripen themselves. But I mean, I've never seen an entire stalk of bananas, or if that's a word. Is it a stalk of bananas, or is it
or a bunch?
Stem of banana, sure. A bunch, yeah. I mean, we're talking the full, stalk of banana or stem bananas.
Dude,
overnight ripened.
Wow.
So I was really glad. I mean, no chemicals, no nothing like that. So I called my mother, and my mother goes, "Oh yeah, they call that smoke." I mean, she used the word terminology, smoking. That's what they used to do. So yeah.
Does it change the flavor of the banana, or does the skin protect
I wouldn't imagine so. I wouldn't imagine so because banana is still going to be protected by the shell. So, But I mean, just to watch that, and I was really, really blown away. And again, the guy's not talking, so you don't. So you're just watching him go about doing this, and these are things you would not see, So I find that really interesting.
It's like this Chinese girl who's doing this. Have you seen that show? This one girl who lives in the countryside with her grandma, I think, and she basically just does everything herself.
Oh, really?
Everything from scratch. Like goes to the little farm that they have, or a little piece of land where they grow the vegetables. She harvests the garlic there, and she ferments things, and she confit things, and she drills things, and basically makes everything from scratch. So that's entertaining and depressing at the same time, because you're thinking, my God, I don't even know how to tie my shoes properly, and she's making a whole full moon party by herself.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. She was featured on an article recently on the New Yorker or the New York Times. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, I think that should do it. That could be our first episode done.
Yes. It's always great talking to you and sharing things.
Yeah. So we're going to try and do this once a week.
Yes.
Hopefully do. But during this time, we might be able to get a couple of episodes in, and then we'll try and get to a regular upload once a week. We will be on all the platforms, but we're not on Apple or Spotify or any of those yet. We are endeavoring to get onto those platforms soon, but we will start off with Facebook and YouTube, and
Instagram as well.
Twitter as well. We'll do our little shorts, so you'll be able to find our short bite-size episodes, 1-minute clips from our episodes on Instagram as well, and Twitter. So that's all of them are at the Play-Doh. So that's where we are. Other than that, thank you for listening, Sebastian. Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to the next episode. Yeah, absolutely.
Catch you next week, guys. See you later.
Have a good one.